All right, let's talk about the US government. Now, you might think of it as this big, complicated machine, but it's probably more helpful to think of it as a giant puzzle, a power puzzle. And it was put together this way on purpose, all to solve one really big problem. So let's start piecing it together. So let's start with a really basic question. When you think of who has the power in the US, your mind probably jumps straight to the president, right? But the truth is, the president doesn't act alone, not by a long shot. The president is just one piece, a really big piece for sure, but still just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And this wasn't an accident. Nope. It was a very intentional design that came from a deep-seated fear, one that goes all the way back to the very founding of the nation. To really get why this puzzle even exists, we gotta rewind the clock a little bit. You see, the entire system we have today was born out of a very specific historical problem that the country's founders were absolutely desperate to solve.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1783. The American Revolution is finally over. The good news? We won. The bad news? The brand new United States is kind of in chaos and really needs a government. Fast forward to 1787, and they land on this revolutionary blueprint, the U.S. Constitution, and it proposed a totally new way to handle governmental power.
And this, right here, was their number one concern. I mean, they had just fought a whole war to free themselves from a monarchy. So the absolute last thing they wanted was to accidentally create a new king right here on American soil. The real challenge was, how do we create a government that's strong, but not too strong? And their solution was pretty brilliant, a system of checks and balances. The big idea was to split power into 3 different branches. Each branch would have its own job, but, and this is the key part, it would also have the ability to limit or check the power of the other 2. It's a design that practically forces them to compromise and keeps any one branch from just taking over. So, let's look at the first piece of our puzzle, the legislative branch. You know, it's interesting. This branch is laid out in Article 1 of the Constitution, right at the beginning. A lot of people think the founders put it first because they saw it as the most important branch, the one that's most directly connected to the people. And its main job is crystal clear. The U.S. Congress makes our nation's laws. Simple as that. Every single federal law, whether it's about taxes or the environment or anything else, it has to start in this branch. That's the core of their power. But you know, making laws is really just the beginning. Congress has a ton of other huge powers. They have to approve federal judges, they control every penny of federal spending through the budget, and get this, they hold the sole power to declare war. I mean, these are truly nation-defining responsibilities. And this lawmaking body is itself split in 2. You've got the Senate, where every state gets 2 senators, equal representation. And then you have the House of Representatives with its 435 members, which gives states with bigger populations a bigger voice. It's another one of those intentional compromises the founders built right into the system. Okay, let's move on to the next piece of our puzzle, the executive branch. So if Congress is in charge of making the laws, this branch is responsible for carrying them out and making sure everybody follows them. And right at the top, you've got the president and the vice president. Their main job is to enforce the laws that Congress passes. This means they're in charge of this vast machinery of the federal government, everything from the FBI to the Environmental Protection Agency, making sure the day-to-day work of the country actually gets done. And the president wears a ton of different hats. They're like the CEO, working with a cabinet of advisors and appointing thousands of government officials. They're the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the world. And they're also our top diplomat representing the U.S. to the rest of the world. And to get all of that done, it takes a massive organization. In fact, the executive branch employs over 4 million people. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. It really gives you a sense of the incredible scale of this branch's day-to-day work. And that brings us to the third and final piece of our power puzzle, the judicial branch. This branch has a totally different job. It doesn't make the laws and it doesn't enforce them. Its role is to interpret them. This branch, which is made up of all the federal courts in the country, basically acts as the ultimate referee. It decides what the laws actually mean when you apply them to real-life situations, and it makes sure that when people break those laws, there are consequences. Sitting at the very peak of this branch is the Supreme Court,
It has the final say on the biggest legal questions. It settles fights between states, and, most importantly, it has the power to decide whether a law passed by Congress and signed by the president is even allowed by the Constitution in the first place.
And here's where things get really interesting, and what gives this branch so much of its power. Unlike the president, who serves a 4-year term, the 9 Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. Now, this was designed to protect them from the day-to-day political pressures, allowing them to make decisions based only on what they believe the law says. So there you have it. We've put together the 3 main pieces of the power puzzle. But you know what? There's one final, absolutely crucial piece that holds the whole thing together, and that's us, the American people. So where do you fit into all of this?
And this is really the bottom line. The entire system, this whole grand experiment, is built on one simple idea. For it to work, the citizens have to understand it. Knowing how these branches check and balance each other isn't just a fun fact for a history test, it's a fundamental part of living in a democracy.
And you know, being involved goes way beyond just voting every few years. You can be a direct part of the judicial process by serving on a jury. You can influence the legislative branch by calling or writing to your representative to support a law you believe in. These are all real, tangible ways that every single citizen can interact with the system.
So we'll leave you with this thought. The government isn't some distant, untouchable machine. It's a puzzle, and you are a vital piece of it. Understanding how it all fits together gives you the power to make your voice heard. The only question left is, how are you going to use it?